All right, what is up, everybody? Coach Mac, Play Fast Football. A little impromptu Monday night live tonight. Haven't been on in a little while. Last live we did was maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it's that time of year where after 4th of July, you kind of, if you're a football coach, you kind of come to the understanding that we are about 2.5 weeks out of it kicking up full time again. Um, so, I enjoyed a little bit of a summer break. Went up to New York, played some golf. I think we went live after that one time, but went up and played some golf, enjoyed some downtime. And then I took some time. I kind of slowed down on YouTube stuff pretty much from the month of June into the right after 4th of July. And then it all kicks back up again. And then it's back to full time. So we're back at it in the weight room, back at it, working out 4 days a week, gearing things up a little bit more towards our prep for the season. Got one or two 7-on-7s left, but at this point right now, we're kind of working more on gearing things a little bit more practice like with our staff. They can't be fully practice like right now because we have a lot of guys that in the summer can't get as much time off. They're adjunct guys that have off campus jobs, and they kind of gear their schedule or their rotation around having afternoons and the football season takes priority. So in the summer for some of those guys, it gets real tough, which is understandable. It's tougher for us right now to kind of say we want to do things. It'd be nice to look at things and say, hey, we want to do a little bit of indie work. We want to, look at maybe some pressure pass or some stunts or, and do some things with all the coaches there. But right now it's hard to get everybody there. So we still get a chance to throw some 7-on-7. We get a chance to line up and do some formation rec. We get a chance to talk a little bit about, some motion adjustments and 3x1 things that we want to look at. And so now that we're in the last 3 weeks before the season kicks off. So for us, we start practice like Monday, July 29th. And I think we play our first preseason game like August 16th or something like that. So, now's the time to kind of clean everything up and get to a point where you start figuring out, all right, what are we actually playing? What's good for our kids? What positions are our kids playing? Right now, the big deal for us, or one of the big deals for us, is trying to figure out our young kids, the freshmen we got coming in. Where do we want to play them on each side of the ball so that we can identify, hopefully make the right choice with those guys early so that we don't waste, any of our time or their time. You're going to make mistakes at the, incoming ninth grade level. Kids are going to get bigger. Kids are going to, there's going to be some kids that develop that you didn't think had a chance. There's going to be some kids that, their body types change. So there's no way with incoming ninth graders at, 14, 15 years old, you're ever going to analyze all of them correctly or evaluate all of them correctly. But the better job you can do at that level. Hey, Tyler, what's up, buddy? The better job you can do at that level, then the more time you can spend with those guys to say, all right, he's, we think he's an O lineman. We think he's a D lineman. We think he's a backer. We think he's a safety. There's always going to be some kids that you have to change that maybe start at corner and then they get a little bit bigger and you make them safeties, or maybe they started as safeties and they get a little bit bigger and you make them linebackers. But, for the most part, if you can get like 80 to 85% of the evaluations kind of correct to where, you're figuring out. For us, we'd like to get it down to where, is a kid going to be a primary offensive or defensive player and then a secondary offensive defensive player? If you're playing kids one way, then your evaluation becomes, are they offensive players or are they defensive players? And again, the earlier you can identify that with those young kids, the better off you have, or the better chance you have, because now you can develop them for the next 4 or 5 years, 4 years at least, from the summertime on going into their freshman year. And then hopefully you are teaching them the skills that they need to be successful at that position. Are there always going to be position changes? Yes. Are there always going to be kids that are surprising? Yes. Kids that don't develop the way you thought they would? Yes. Kids that develop way more than you thought they would? Yes. But as a varsity coach for a long time, as a head coach, and now as just a defensive coordinator, we talk all the time about how important our early evaluations are of our freshman group. And so that's one of the things we'd like to see a little bit more of right now. So we've kind of early on with our young kids coming in, we separate them completely from the older group. And then as we get into the month of July, now we start bringing back some of the sophomores that are going to play JV with those freshmen, and we start looking at the entire group to see, what positions do we need? Where do we feel good? Can we change, or do we need to change any positions? Of any of the kids where they want to go first or where we need them to go. For me on defense, it's all right. How many D linemen do we actually have? Are there any bodies that say they're backers that are bigger that maybe we can move the D line? How many backers do we have? How many safeties? How many corners? So, you try to get that figured out with the freshman group. And then in the month of July, we kind of dial back the 10th grade group of the guys that are going to play mostly JV ball, even some of the 6-quarter guys. If the majority of their quarters are going to be JV football, then we kind of bring them back down so that they can work out with, the younger guys. And then as a coaching staff, we can kind of look at that picture as a whole. I think sometimes early on in June, we see just a freshman and you panic a little bit thinking, oh, well, there's not a quarterback there. There's not enough D linemen there. There's not enough of, a certain position there. And then when you get back in July and you kind of bring the 10th graders back down with them and you look at the whole picture, all of a sudden it's like, all right, we're not as bad as we thought now that we get everybody back together. And those are things that you understand. Like, obviously we know what our roster is. So I'm not saying, we're looking at the 9th graders and panicking because we forgot about our 10th graders. What I'm saying is when you treat those groups separately in the month of June, which is also a good thing because those 9th graders are not fully indoctrinated into what we do in the weight room and how we live. So keeping them separate, I think, is a good idea. But once you get to July and you put them together, now you get a kind of a bigger picture of, all right, look, these are the bodies that we have to play defense. These are, this is the full JV roster. And then it kind of allows us to also separate the varsity kids to where we can start. Oh, good for you, Kuroga. 10 times state champs and 3 times national champs, huh? Good for you. I'm glad you got there. Hopefully you guys can pull it off, but getting there is a huge part of the battle. And, congratulations on that. And when is the game? Obviously probably coming up. We are rolling. Yeah, unfortunately, we're kind of getting away from it, Kuroga. I wish we could stay with it, but body types, personnel, kids that we need to play on defense, things that offenses are doing to us. It's not in the cards right now. Maybe we can get back to it in the future, but we've got some bodies that we need to use in some spots that don't really fit in the 3 high stuff. And then we're also seeing a lot more 12 personnel and some things that people are doing to attack the 3 high stuff. So don't think we're going to be able to use it as a base this year on defense for us. But, that's a good part about defense. There's so many different ways to win games. And as a coordinator, even as a content creator, as much as I've talked the last 2 years about 3 high stuff and as many videos as I've done on 3 high, my job as a coordinator is we got to win games. And I got to put our kids in position to win games. I got to put our coaching staff in position to win games. And, one of the things we're also looking at doing is kind of trying to, I want to say oversimplify, but we're trying to, with the group we got coming back, we've got a lot of new pieces in at positions that don't have a lot of, time in the saddle right now, don't have a lot of varsity reps, and trying to dial some things back a little bit to make it a little bit easier for them early on so that we can kind of get in the flow of what we're trying to do on defense. Our coverages on the back end aren't changing that much. We're trying to dial back some of our 3x1 deals because last year was like the perfect storm. I get there when those kids are in 10th grade and, last year is the second year in the system and we've got a bunch of returning starters and now we can do a bunch of different things. And now it's kind of almost like a rewind where, we return some bodies up front, but we've got, 1 or 2 corners that we move to safety, and we've got 2 new corners, and we've got a new nickel, and we've got, what would have been a new middle safety. We've got a new Mike linebacker. So a lot of moving parts, a lot of new parts that, kids that are good players, kids that we like a bunch. But I think right now we've got to dial some things back after the spring and after some of our 7-on-7. I think we need to tone it down a little bit, back it up or back off a little bit, and kind of iron out some of the things that we really need to do to play good football until they have enough reps under their belt and enough understanding of what we want to do to then come back and say, okay, we can add some more things. So I've talked about that several times in um, several different videos we've done. I've talked about how, just because we have all these different things we can play doesn't mean we carry them all, doesn't mean we play them all. And this is certainly a year where we're going to have to tone some things back a little bit. I think we're a little bit more athletic than we've been at certain positions, which is really nice. But not a lot of reps at said positions. So yeah, I mean, 100%. We talk about it all the time. Answers are only answers if you can play them, right? So if you tell kids what the answers are, and if they come out in this, we're going to do that, and don't actually teach them, or you don't do a good job teaching them, then if you can't play the answer, then it's really not an answer, right? Really, it's just a way of a head coach checking a box and saying, all right, I feel good about we have all the adjustments we need. But adjustments are only adjustments if you can play them, if your kids understand them. And then, the keep it simple, stupid method, I think, is always a great piece of advice. But there's also going to be a time where you've got to stray from that a little bit. If you have kids that are a little bit undersized, not as talented, but they have the capacity to learn, they've been with you a couple of years, I think you need to get a little bit more complicated with your scheme because, if you can't line up and just whip somebody's ass, at some point you've got to do something to put your kids in position to win. But at the same time, if you're new, or you're new at a place, or new at a school, or your kids are new, or you have a lot of kids at positions that don't have a lot of time in the saddle, like I said, like we do, then keep it simple, stupid. The KISS method is, a really good way to do it. And again, it's also trying to keep it simple so you can get to see if the kids that you're playing are the right ones. Can they be physical? Can they play with relentless effort? Because sometimes kids aren't necessarily scared. They're just confused, and they play slow when they're confused. So, right now with all the moving parts that we've got, I think we've got to kind of dial back a little bit. I think, again, down the road, I think these kids that are going to be here and get 2 years as starters, a lot of the kids, we're playing a lot of 10th graders, juniors now. I say 10th graders because that's what they were in the spring, but we're going to play a lot of juniors on defense. So obviously next year, I feel like we can amp it up again, and maybe we can even get back to our 3 high stuff. But, right now that scheme doesn't really fit us. And we've got to figure out a way to keep the kids that we have doing the things that they can do really well. So what you played around with the peso front? Not a bunch. Haven't really done anything with it. I've seen some of the stuff that's out there. It's hard for me to keep up with all the stuff that's out there between, the different college stuff, the NFL stuff, and then who's labeling what. Everything I see now is the penny front and, different ways of getting to bear and all these other things. But I've heard of the peso stuff. I've never really played any of it. Would love to investigate it, but right now I'm kind of got my hands full figuring out what we need to play. We're going to be a 3-4 team. I think that's pretty much said and done, but it's just a matter of how we're going to play certain things. Some numbers look like spring baseball and lax been killing us past couple of years. Yeah, we got a bunch of baseball players on our team. I think they're finishing up a lot of their baseball stuff right now. And, obviously it's hard to get them all there to get the reps that you need. That's always going to be an issue with high school football, I think, for any coaching staff. You're trying to do things over the summer. You're trying to plan things out. You're trying to get some install in, some 7-on-7 in. And then you got to, you kind of got to do it around vacations and 4th of July and summer baseball, summer basketball, other sports that kids are playing. So I think that everybody's kind of in the same battle or in the same boat with that battle. So right now I would say any given day. So, today, first day back after the July 4th holiday, we probably had with both groups there, there were probably 65 to 70 kids there today. Probably 35 or 40 with the young group, 9th and 10th grade, and then probably 30 guys with the older group. So, I would think our numbers right now are pretty solid for this time of year. Again, we'll get some other people back. We are middle of the road in Florida. We have about 1,350 students, maybe somewhere around there. So we're actually probably, if not middle of the road, maybe a little bit on the smaller end as far as Florida's concerned. But about 1,350. So we usually carry about 75 to 80 players, depending on the year. Last year we had a really big freshman group. So numbers aren't always the issue for us. It's the depth of those numbers. Do we have enough linemen? Do we have enough offensive linemen? Do we have enough defensive linemen? Um, what do you equate those numbers to? Do you have a whole bunch of skills, not enough linemen? Do you have a bunch of linemen, maybe not enough skills? So I think at every school, every program, those things all have to be kind of evaluated differently. So, numbers per se, as a whole, I think are good, but it's then a matter of, do we have the right numbers where we need them? Those 3-4 slant along like the old App State. No. It's going to be more mint front orientated to where we're going to keep playing tight front, but we're going to try and get the fourth rusher away from the nickel. It's going to have some boundary reduction feel to it. But I don't want to fully go boundary reduction. Obviously, after coming off the mint front stuff with the weak side backer coming, one of the first things we'll do right away is get to where the nickel comes, and what everybody, I don't know what everybody calls it nowadays, Favre or whatever it is, the field side nickel safety being the fourth rusher, and then for us probably play three deep behind it. But that's usually, if you're a 3-4 boundary reduction team or a slant and angle team, that's usually one of the first things you do is, you bring the weak side boundary away from passing strength, jack, rush, linebacker, whatever you want to call them. And you get, you get into old school under front boundary reduction. And then one of your first change ups is bringing the nickel from the field and moving the front the other way. So I don't think we're going to be truly slant and angle as of right now. I think we're going to be more mint front in nature. Tight front, the fourth rush will come weak. It'll have some semblance of boundary reduction, but there won't be an A shade and a 5 to the passing strength side or to the field side, however you want to look at it. It's going to be more tight front orientated. I don't want to get away from the tight front stuff because I still think it becomes a game plan issue. I still think it becomes something that people have to identify how they want to attack it and how they want to block it. If you become even now, slant and angling is a little bit different, but if you become just an under or an over team, I think teams have way more answers than they do versus tight front stuff. So, the body that we want to use at the weak side outside backer, that's kind of the bench guy, the reduction guy. That body is somebody we need to get involved a little bit more. So it makes sense for us to run some of the mint stuff and not just true over under stuff. He's going to have to play with his hand in the ground a little bit, or at least as a stand up 5 technique, so that we can bounce in and out of some even and odd fronts. But the intent right now is not to be fully slant and angle. The intent right now is to be more mint front by nature, nickel to the passing strength, jack backer away from the passing strength as a fourth rusher. And then we're also going to have the ability to drop the jack because, two of the main reasons we're going to what we're going to is personnel. And the other one is to be able to handle some of the things that we are starting to see from teams that we're playing. So we got a new district, new schedule. It's not the exact same, but second year of the 3 high stuff, you started to see a trend of what people were doing. And it's the trend now, kind of returning in college and the NFL too, right? A lot of 12, a lot of 13, trying to catch up with all the nickel defenses and, trying to catch up so that you can take advantage of the bodies that the defense is trying to play. It's kind of an answer to that, but at the same time, it's a personnel deal where we've got a couple kids we need to get involved in what we're doing. And I just didn't feel like 3 high was the way for us to get those kids involved. So more mint front in nature, not true reduction. It'll have similarities to reduction, but probably if you had to categorize it, to me, it would be more of the mint front stuff that people are playing now. So tight front, fourth rusher weak, the ability to send the fourth rusher from strong and drop that weak side guy. And then our 5-man pressure, 6-man pressures, our 3 under 3, 4 under 2, some of our hot stuff, and then some of our man deals. So our field side nickel passing strength overhang is a box player, force player. what we're going to do with the mint front weak side guy when he's involved in the rush, he's the guy that we got to keep really active. So I don't think we're going to spill with him. I think we're going to try and dent with him, and he's certainly going to squeeze and close, but I don't want to eat him up as a spill player. So we're probably going to kind of dent with him and see if he can maybe make some plays, with his athletic ability. So that's one of the reasons. Again, that position is one of the reasons we're going to what we're going to, and I didn't want to go to that and just make the kid a spill player, because I think you kind of lose some of his athletic ability if he just becomes a spill player. So, the passing strength, he's a box player. He doesn't have a lot of other choices how to play that. It would depend on formation. Some of it depends on, are we getting like GT bash stuff with read principles where we got to equate numbers to the bash and to the pullers if they're pulling away from the bash. If it's just GT stuff, we should be okay. The one that gives us issues in tight front is when it's GT extra with, like a GT and a back, running quarterback counter to make it to where there's possibly 3 pullers that get there. We normally, in a tight front or mint front, we normally get all solo blocks up front. And then we normally equate the numbers well enough to 2 pullers. It's 3 pullers that starts to give us a little bit of an issue, even when we were playing with a middle safety. So, if you're looking at the nickel as an overhang, is usually a force player in most of our coverages. The jack is an overhang if he's involved in the rush. He's going to be what we consider a dent player. And if he's in coverage, then he's probably more often than not a force player. So he's got to be able to play a little bit of quarters. He's got to play some palms, the 2 removed. When he's doing those things based on the coverage, he's going to have to be a force player, and he would be what you would probably consider a box player. Or, I still say the word force. I consider box. I guess you can. Boxing to me is more of a line of scrimmage type deal, but it's one of those deals where I get it. If you're a force player, you're turning things back inside. Technically, box is turning things inside. So I just try to keep, for me, when I'm having conversations, like a box player to me is a first level player. A force player to me would be, what I would consider a second level player. But you could also force with your defensive ends, right? That's what makes football so confusing to a lot of people. They run the back, front side, and QB run that side, and your middle guys. No, I'm talking about they're running like GT counter off of maybe some RPO draw action or, maybe a stick play front side, but they also have the tailback weak leading for the quarterback. So it ends up becoming GT and tailback so it's quarterback counter with an extra blocker. So when we were tight front, they would block everything back. So they would solo the 4-eye, the nose, and the 4-eye. So the center would go all the way back to the 4-eye. The guard would go down on the nose. The front side tackle would go down on a 4-eye. They'd get the guard and the tackle out, and then the quarterback would flash an RPO look, or he would flash stick. They might have had stick attached to it. They never really threw it, but quarterback would flash that. And then if we weren't pressuring or moving, if they got all the back blocks that they needed, now they've got 3 pullers, GT, and the tailback to the weak side. So, again, with our 3 high stuff, we got it matched up fairly decent, but you're doing it from the 3rd level, and that extra guys coming from deeper. And that's where being a traditional front spill team helps you a little bit, because even if they get 3 pullers, if you can spill one of them, now you only have to handle the other 2, right? So, that's where being able to spill some things definitely is an added advantage for you. But obviously, if you're playing some 4-eye stuff, some tight front stuff, you don't get a chance to spill those. So, with everything, there's a strength, there's a weakness. You got to figure out what the strength is, what the weakness is. You got to figure out how much of it you're seeing, and then what the answer is. Like I said, if we were playing mint front stuff and then all of a sudden we could bring the nickel from the field, well, now the nickel's coming as a 4th. Now they're trying to solo. They're going back on a 4-eye, down on the nose, down on the front side 4-eye, and now you're bringing a nickel from the field as the 4th, and they don't have anybody to protect the quarterback because there's no mesh. The other back is lead blocking for the counter weak, so if you could move into it a little bit, bring the fourth off the edge. We had some success with our 5-man stuff just because that scheme was really kind of a tight front beater where they knew that if they could get the 3 solo blocks, then they could get 2 pullers for the Mike and the Will, and then they could equate for the middle safety or the force player with the back as the third blocker. So, again, I'm not saying we see it every week. I'm not saying we see it, as a scheme that everybody majors in. I'm just saying we've seen it enough. No, cold draw. When I do YouTube live in my house, I do not have a whiteboard. I do not have a whiteboard in my house. Unfortunately, I could probably find a piece of paper, draw it up, and hold it up and show it to you. Maybe. That's why I've always wanted to I've always wanted to have a YouTube studio in my house where I could be whiteboard ready, but like my YouTube live stuff at home is in a front room on a couch, usually with cats running around, and my regular YouTube stuff is done at school or wherever I have a whiteboard ready. So I actually don't have a studio at the house. I don't do any of my stuff here. I should be saying come on to you for asking to draw it up. If you're going to be on this channel, you got to be able to picture things in your head. What do I got here? All right. Sharpie.